Welcome, one and all, to Sociology Princess, where we explore sociology through Disney. My name is Christy, and today I want to deliver a fresh take on one of Disney's oldest films, Sleeping Beauty, to see what it tells its viewers about the value of including older women in our modern society. I know that sounds like a stretch because it's a classic Disney princess movie, but hear me out. But before I make my case for Sleeping Beauty, let's take a look at some data calculated on Disney features that I found to be quite enlightening. A study I read in the Washington Post calculated how often female characters speak in Disney movies. Sadly, out of all the princess films listed, only 5 princess films had women delivering at least or over 50% of the total dialogue. At first, I thought the more empowered a Disney princess was considered to be, the more lines women would have in the film. Turns out that's not necessarily the case. If there was a Disney princess that was to be considered a feminist icon, it would be Mulan, who had to navigate a man's world in order to do what was right to protect her family. But because she's a woman in an all male platoon, it makes sense that most of the dialogue was spoken by men, even though Mulan's the main character. Ultimately, less than 25% of the dialogue in this feature is spoken by women. And Mulan's not alone in this. All of the other princess films of the Disney Renaissance era have approximately 25% of the lines being delivered by female characters. These films include Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Pocahontas. Pocahontas has a lot more prominent issues in how many lines women do or do not speak, but Lindsay Ellis has already addressed those issues, and I'd encourage you to go back and watch that video on her YouTube channel if you haven't already. Despite the Disney Renaissance movies providing more independent female leads with more agency, where the classic princess films really shine is the amount of dialogue afforded to women. All three of these classic tales had at least 50% of their lines delivered by women. Cinderella is split evenly at 50-50. Then it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and the leader of the three is Sleeping Beauty, which clocks in at 60%. The only princess film to surpass Sleeping Beauty in the sheer volume of female dialogue is Pixar's Brave. Now, some of you might be thinking, how does this data make sense? Doesn't Aurora spend most of the film, sleeping? Aurora, the princess herself, does have the least amount of speaking lines of any of the other princesses. So then, who is delivering all of these lines? Well, the villain is Maleficent, and she's a woman. Well, I'm sure she helps raise this percentage. I don't think she's the culprit I'm looking for. Not this time, anyways. The reason why the percentage is so high for this film, from my observations, should be credited to the three good fairies, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather. But that leads me to another question. Why did the animators settle on 3 fairies? In former retellings of the story, there's often way more fairies than 3. One of the earliest versions, written by Charles Perrault, consists of 7 fairies, and the Brothers Grimm version has up to 12 good fairies. 12. That's like the size of a large K-pop group. When I was in high school, I actually did the ballet version of Sleeping Beauty. I was one of the 6 good fairies at Aurora's coronation. In order, the 6 fairies are Water, Harvest, Breadcrumb, Canary, Golden Vine, and their fearless leader, the Lilac Fairy. I was the Breadcrumb Fairy, the Fairy of Generosity, and yes, my tutu was pink, and I loved it. Okay, getting back on track here. We've now covered how Disney took some liberties in reducing the number of fairies to 3. And changing their names, by the way. I just now realized that. But did the film's creators also change the ages of the fairies? Most of the Sleeping Beauty renditions I looked at did not provide specific ages, with the exception of Perrault's version, in which the evil 8th fairy is an older woman. When the story is told as a ballet, the fairies are played by soloists who are likely not any older than their mid-30s. So, why were the fairies aged up a lot in the Disney version? That answer is given by the animators Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. In an interview with Jerry Beck on his blog Cartoon Research, Frank says they thought that having the fairies be older and rounder would give them a distinct and lively characterization. He's not entirely wrong, to be honest. Frank divulges that he spent hours studying older ladies' movements and dress styles in a variety of locations, including grocery stores, weddings, and on vacation at the beach. Neither Frank nor Ollie admitted to this, but I could picture them crashing a wedding because they seem like fun guys. Well, Frank shares that his reasoning was quite simple behind the decision to make Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather older women. I can't help but find significance in the fact that they are older women who are essential to the plot. Though initially the fairies' characterization was limited to being comical, I can't help but infer a deeper meaning to their significance in the narrative. I argue that Sleeping Beauty is a film that treats older women as relevant, and this message holds up today in a society that devalues older women. Ageism is prejudice against someone or a group of people based on their age. While this could technically apply to any age, Merriam-Webster defines ageism as prejudice or discrimination against a particular age group and especially the elderly or older adults. What we do not get in the definition is how ageism can impact men and women differently. Let's focus our attention on one concrete example: older women in the workforce. A study done by Newmark, Byrne, and Button that was updated in 2017 conducted a resume correspondence study which found that younger women were more likely to be considered for a job than older women. They determined these same biases were not applied to men, as both older and younger men were considered for hire at comparable rates. The researchers note that over the age of 40, the perception around women is they have already peaked in their careers and they don't have much more to offer. According to the Harvard Business Review, women may be fired from their jobs before they are ready to retire. Of course, beauty standards play a role in this perception as well. As the older women get, the harder it is to maintain a youthful appearance. Although social norms are changing around women's hair, see Pantene's recent ad #PowerOfGray, there's still a perception that women are unable to contribute what they once could to their job solely based off of their hair changing color and other visible signs of aging. On the other hand, older men's physical appearance is often interpreted as experience and hard-earned wisdom. The best example I could think of to explain this is a hair product called Touch of Gray, available for purchase at justformen.com, because supposedly only men would want to show off their gray hairs. I would be remiss not to mention the earnings gap. Older women are paid significantly less than their older male colleagues, and when they finally retire, women are more likely to be living in poverty. This study is just one of many that shows how perceptions around gender and age can have a very real impact in people's lives. So what the heck does any of this have to do with Sleeping Beauty? Well, I think that some parallels can be drawn between the roles of Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather to what society should look like for older women today. I suspect that even before the events of the movie take place, these fairies were working. They were most likely spending their time aiding the citizens of the kingdom with their magic, which they had to stop using for Aurora's protection. Their frustration of not being able to use their magic implies they're confident in their capabilities, which is likely strengthened by the wisdom of experience. They're definitely more scatterbrained and struggle without their wands, but once they get them back, they're able to do all the things, anything they want, and do it well. Because of the vital role they play in the kingdom, they are probably, hopefully, not struggling financially. If anything, given their connections to royalty, they are pretty well off. Their age does not disqualify them from working. If they're capable of helping others with magic, I'm sure they can find plenty of things to do. And of course, flora and fauna rock their gray hair. So I asked in the thumbnail if this movie is actually feminist. I personally would not go as far as to say that, but I do think it's unfair to label this film as sexist. Clearly, this film is a product of its time as the story follows clear fantasy archetypes that were popular in the 1950s. This leads to its characters, both male and female, lacking depth and as a result are more one dimensional than the multifaceted characters we see on screen nowadays. Another popular criticism is that Aurora does have the least amount of speaking lines of any Disney princess, sleeps for a portion of her movie, and is awoken by a kiss that she probably did want, considering they already met in the woods and they danced in each other's arms, and it was really cute. While I do think it's important for a main character to have agency over their decisions, I still feel like sometimes we're a bit hard on Aurora's character for her lack of speaking dialogue. Again, this film has a lot of dialogue spoken by women, even if it's not done by the character the film is named after. Also, there's another princess who willingly gives up her voice in order to explore the world up above. I know we criticize Ariel for this too, but I still feel like Aurora gets much more flack for this, especially after the live action Little Mermaid came out. Of course, I want female characters to make decisions in their films, but sometimes our lives are out of control, regardless of our gender. We as viewers have to remember that Maleficent had a death wish for the princess, so she couldn't really have the freedom she otherwise would have had. I don't think Aurora is aware of this during the film. Maybe they changed that in the live action. I'm not sure. I still haven't watched it. Sorry. But for her own safety, we as the audience know that we want Aurora to stay with the three good fairies because that's her best chance of surviving. I also think that over the years, the three good fairies have cultivated a relationship with her and gained her trust. This is a huge difference between why these fairies are on a stakeout with a princess as opposed to someone like Mother Gothel in Tangled, who clearly had selfish means for isolating Rapunzel. While I don't want to dismiss our modern takes on Sleeping Beauty, I just feel like it's not necessary to keep going on and on about the classic film's shortcomings. Disney has clearly updated its princess brand. There have been so many princess films since 1959 where princesses get to make decisions that impact the plot. Additionally, I feel like sometimes talking about this film so much prevents Disney fans from maybe looking deeper into Disney's other works that have other isms that need to be constructed. But much more on that later. We're getting there. Before I wrap up this episode, I figured I'd give my personal thoughts on these remakes of Disney movies, including the upcoming one, Snow White in 2024, I believe.
Snow White does share some archetypes with Sleeping Beauty, including a romance between a prince and a princess. Now, Rachel Zegler's come under a lot of scrutiny for her comments that the remake will not be about a romance. But if you're hoping I'll slam Zegler, no, 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 no. I'm not here to do that. I like her way too much. But her comments about the remake did make me wonder how close to the original source work a remake should be. Honestly, I think remakes should have the freedom to be anywhere from its strict adherence to the original work to changing it significantly to create a distinct experience. But at least in my personal headcanon, I think there can be a version of the 2024 Snow White where she does get to be a leader and also fall head over heels for a prince. And these thoughts tie into my experience when watching Sleeping Beauty. The goal of Aurora's story was to have her get her happily ever after. But in today's world, I think women can be empowered to reach their goals and fall in love. It can be both. I personally would like to see some hints of romance in the new Snow White film, while still seeing newer sides to her character that weren't highlighted in the original movie. But I can talk much more about Snow White's remake in the future, so we'll see if that comes up.
Thank you for listening. I know that I'm not even 30 yet, but aging is a topic that can be considered regardless of your current age. Knowing what to look out for or for your loved ones can be really helpful when you know what ageism looks like. Hopefully, you can find ways to navigate those situations. And until next time, remember that shade never made anybody less autistic.